It is said that a woman marked by silent pain approached the Pope. Her tear-filled eyes and hesitant voice revealed the weight of a peculiar loneliness. She slept alone, though still married. Her husband had not left, nor had he passed away. He remained by her side, but his heart had distanced itself. In the eyes of society, family, and the church itself, they were seen as a united couple, but in the intimacy of their home, what remained was a growing emptiness. This loneliness, so common and so rarely spoken of, is one of the deepest wounds that can mark a marriage. The Pope, with the wisdom of one who knows human sorrows, listened to her with respectful silence. He allowed her to unburden herself, for her tears to flow freely, for her anguish to pour out without judgment. This gesture in itself was a balm. To be heard in pain is the first step towards healing. When he finally spoke, his words touched deeper than she could have expected. He told her, "Daughter, the worst loneliness is not that of one who is alone, but that of one who shares a bed with an absent person." With this affirmation, the Pope named a truth that many couples live, but few have the courage to admit. Indifference within marriage is a wound that corrodes love slowly and almost imperceptibly. He continued, explaining that a couple's bedroom should be a sacred altar, where two hearts offer themselves to each other every night. It is not just about sharing the same physical space, but about renewing, day after day, the gift of self, the commitment made before God and the Church. Marriage, Catholic tradition teaches, is a sacrament, a visible sign of God's invisible grace. It is called to be a reflection of Christ's love for the Church, a faithful, generous, persevering love, capable of traversing the darkest nights. When one of the two ceases to give of themselves, it's not just the bed that grows cold. The spirit sickens, dialogue falls silent, forgiveness withdraws. The Pope perceived that the woman's pain did not come from a great tragedy, but from the accumulation of small surrenders, of gestures not made, of words not spoken. Many think that love dies because of great betrayals or shouting, he said, but the truth is that it begins to die in unspoken words, in hands that don't touch, in nights when one lies far from the other and pretends not to notice. When a husband stops seeking his wife, he is saying with his body what he lacks the courage to say with his lips. I am no longer here to. This reflection echoes St. Paul's teaching to the Ephesians. Husbands, love your wives just as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. Ephesians 5 verse 25. Conjugal love, according to Catholic faith, is not just a feeling but a decision, a surrender, a self-renunciation for the sake of the other. It is a path to holiness, where every daily gesture, however small, can be an offering pleasing to God. Therefore, indifference is so destructive. It undermines the foundation of the sacrament, chills the altar of the home, and prevents grace from flowing freely between spouses. The Pope, with his pastoral sensitivity, revealed a profound truth to the woman. A wife's heart doesn't break all at once, but shatters little by little with the disappearance of small gestures of love. Indifference, he taught, is what most destroys a union. There are husbands who think they fulfill their role merely by wearing a wedding band, but marriage is not sustained by a ring on the finger, but by a living covenant between souls. The symbol of the ring, so valued in Catholic tradition, only makes sense when it reflects the reality of a commitment renewed daily, not just before witnesses, but in the secrecy of the bedroom, in the silence of the nights, in moments of vulnerability and reconciliation. The Church teaches that marriage is a sacrament instituted by Christ, a path of sanctification for spouses. The Catechism of the Catholic Church states, matrimony is the covenant by which a man and a woman establish between themselves a partnership of the whole of life, which is by its nature ordered toward the good of the spouses and the procreation and education of offspring. CCC 1601. This communion of life demands more than mere cohabitation. It requires real presence, mutual self-giving, sincere dialogue, and constant forgiveness. When the Pope says that the couple's bedroom is an altar, he reminds us that there, in daily life, a domestic liturgy is celebrated, where every gesture of love, reconciliation, listening, and tenderness is an offering to God. Marriage is not merely a social contract or an agreement for living together. It is a call to holiness, a path of cross and resurrection, where joys and sorrows are shared before the Lord. Therefore, the absence of one spouse, even if physically present, is a wound that cries out for healing. The woman in the story represents many others who, within seemingly stable homes, experience the pain of indifference. Her suffering is no less profound for not being scandalous. On the contrary, it is more difficult to comprehend and embrace. The Church, as a mother, is called to hear these pains, to embrace with mercy, to offer paths of hope and restoration. The Pope, by listening to that woman, echoes Christ himself, who always had compassion for those who suffer in silence, for those who carry hidden crosses, for those who weep alone. Indifference, Catholic doctrine teaches, is a silent poison. Jesus, when speaking of marriage, recalled, "What God has joined together, let no one separate." Matthew 19 verse 6. But this union is not just legal, it is spiritual, emotional, existential. It is built and rebuilt each day with God's grace and human effort. When one spouse withdraws even without leaving home, something sacred breaks. The silence, the lack of dialogue, the absence of gestures of affection gradually create a chasm difficult to bridge. The Pope, in consoling the woman, does not condemn her or her husband. He recognizes the complexity of human relationships, the fragilities, fears, and limitations. But he also points to a path of hope. You are not alone. No woman of faith truly sleeps alone, because the one who is faithful watches over her every night. God does not sleep. He cares and waits for you not to remain silent, not to allow silence to destroy what he has blessed. Here lies the heart of the Christian message. Even in loneliness, God remains faithful. He is the invisible companion, the silent comforter, the guardian of covenants. Marriage, in its essence, is a call to a communion of lives, to the total and reciprocal self-giving of spouses. However, when indifference silently takes root, it transforms into a deep spiritual wound. It's not just the body that distances itself, but the soul that withdraws, creating an abyss where intimacy and trust once thrived. The woman in the story, seeking solace from the Pope, represents countless others who, even surrounded by people, feel invisible to the one they promised to love forever. Catholic tradition teaches that marriage is supported by three pillars: dialogue, forgiveness, and presence. Dialogue is the bridge that unites hearts, even amidst disagreements. Forgiveness is the balm that heals the inevitable wounds of living together. And presence, not just physical but emotional and spiritual, is the soil where small acts of love flourish. When one of these pillars is neglected, the structure of the home begins to crumble. Indifference often stems from weariness, daily worries, or unresolved grievances. But when it's not fought, it transforms into a silence that screams, an absence that weighs more than any harsh word. The Pope, in advising the woman, reminded her that love does not die all at once. It fades slowly in nights when one lies down without wishing good night, in days when glances don't meet, in weeks when touch becomes rare. It is the small surrenders accumulated over time that erode the joy of marriage. Therefore, the Church insists, love is a daily choice, a commitment renewed even in the face of difficulties. It's not enough to be together. One must be a living presence, a concrete sign of God's grace. At the heart of the Pope's message is the certainty that fidelity does not depend solely on human reciprocity, but is anchored, above all, in the fidelity of God. The woman, even in her loneliness, is invited to persevere in prayer, to seek in God the strength to continue loving with dignity. The Lord, who sees all, embraces every tear, every silent plea, every gesture of love offered without return. No woman of faith truly sleeps alone, because the one who is faithful watches over her every night. This truth comforts and strengthens. God is the companion who never abandons, the silent comforter, the guardian of covenants. Fidelity, for the Church, is a virtue manifested not only in the absence of betrayal but, above all, in the constancy of love in the face of trials. This is what the book of Hosea teaches, when God compares his love for his people to the love of a faithful spouse, who does not give up even in the face of the other's infidelity. Thus, Christian marriage is called to be a reflection of this tireless love, which waits, forgives, and restarts. The woman in the story discovers that her worth is not conditioned by her husband's presence or affection, but by the dignity of being a beloved daughter of God. It is this identity that allows her to stand firm, even when everything around her seems to crumble. The Pope's response is not one of condemnation but of hope. He invites the woman, and all couples experiencing similar situations, to not remain silent in their pain, to seek help, to open their hearts to dialogue. Silence, when it becomes a wall, prevents restoration, but when it transforms into prayer, it opens space for miracles. The Church offers, through the sacraments, concrete paths to healing: confession, which restores communion with God and neighbor; the Eucharist, which strengthens on the journey; spiritual direction, which guides and consoles. The Pope reminds us that the greatest miracles happen precisely where the wounds are deepest. Marriage, even when wounded, can be reborn when both spouses decide to reunite, not out of pride or obligation but out of love and faith. Forgiveness, when offered from the heart, has the power to rekindle the flame that seemed extinguished. constant presence, even when the other withdraws, is a silent testament to a love that does not easily give up. The woman understands that her loneliness, far from being a punishment, can become a path to redemption. By kneeling, she draws closer to heaven, becoming an intercessor for her husband, for her family, for all homes marked by indifference. Prayer transforms the cold room into an altar of hope, where God performs silent miracles. Do not fear the solitude that seeks God, fear more the company that leads you away from Him. This phrase from the Pope is an invitation to trust. It's better to be alone with God than in the company of someone who no longer shares the same spirit. The tradition of the saints confirms this truth. Saint Monica, mother of Saint Augustine, prayed for years for the conversion of her husband and son, never losing hope. Her perseverance was rewarded with the transformation of her entire family. Thus, every woman, every man who suffers loneliness within marriage, is called not to give up, to trust that God can transform even the most arid situations into gardens of new life. The Pope concludes his message with a transformative word of hope. The deepest wound is the one experienced by two, but it is also there that the greatest miracles happen. Marriage, even wounded, can be reborn when spouses decide to reunite, not out of obligation but out of love and faith. God's grace is capable of restoring what seemed lost, rekindling dialogue, healing hurts, and bringing back the light to their eyes and warmth to their bed. Love, the Church teaches, is not automatic. It is a daily choice, an act of care, self-sacrifice, and presence. Even when one person withdraws, the other can continue to love with dignity, certain that, before God, whoever truly loves is never alone. It is this strength that transforms the coldest room into an altar of hope, making marriage a path to holiness, even on the darkest nights. The story of the woman who sought solace from the Pope echoes for all couples who sleep side by side with distant hearts. It is a call to awaken before it's too late, to renew commitment, to rekindle love. Marriage is a gift and a mission, a path of cross and resurrection, a school of forgiveness and hope. The Church, as a mother, welcomes, comforts, and guides, always offering the path of reconciliation and grace. May every couple, upon hearing this message, feel called to look at each other with more tenderness, to value small gestures, to begin anew as many times as necessary. May loneliness not be a cause for despair, but an opportunity for a deeper encounter with God and with oneself. And may, through the intercession of the Virgin Mary, a model of fidelity and love, all homes be restored in the grace and peace of the Lord.